So in our previous session, up to which portion did we complete? Like, did we finish up to RC 6? Good morning. In previous session, can you just type in the chat box? We finished. Did we finish that up to RC 6? Okay. Thank you. I'm sharing my screen. Okay. So today we are going to focus on RC 7 and 8. Okay, so in the first half of the session, we'll take a look at RC 7, which basically has some tricky long passages. Okay. And then in the second half of the session, we'll look at both, mostly short passages and a few long ones. And all in all, these passages that we are doing today, there are 35 questions. So that's like, the maximum questions that have come on a CSAT paper till now are 36 or 37. So it's like the entire verbal section of your CSAT. You will be answering 35 questions today. So we'll get a fair idea of your accuracy as well. And we are going to do all this with a timer, with the discussions. Okay, so it's going to be, let's see, interesting workshop. So in this class material 7, which is on page number 235, there are 5 passages which we'll be taking up one by one. This passage 1 talks about desertification, and it's a fairly detailed passage, but there are just 3 questions associated with it. So you solve it, but try to do it a little fast because there are just 3 questions. So you should ideally solve it in 6 minutes. Ideally 6 minutes. But you can take a couple of minutes of extra time if you want. So you can begin now. You have to solve passage 1. Your time limit is 6 to 8 minutes. Please start. Please start. Okay, so time is up. Has everybody finished with it? Please type done in the chat box if you have finished this passage 1. Everyone done? And if you've not done, you can tell me that you're doing. I'll give you another 1 or 2 minutes in case you're doing. And if you're not, we can go ahead. Okay, then I suppose everybody has finished and we can. Oh, okay, couple of students. Okay, fine. Take another final 2 minutes. Final 2 minutes. Some students are still doing it. So, final 2 minutes. Okay, so I guess everybody would have finished by now. So let's start discussing these passages. Okay. So it talks about desertification. It's given that desertification is a term used to explain a process of decline in the biological productivity of an ecosystem, leading to total loss of productivity. So the ecosystem becomes entirely unproductive. That's called desertification. While this phenomenon is often linked to the arid, semi-arid, and sub-humid ecosystems. Arid means dry. So arid, sub-arid, and semi-arid and sub-humid ecosystems. Even in the humid tropics, the impact could be most dramatic. So it can be found in the tropical areas as well. Impoverishment of human impacted terrestrial ecosystems. Human impacted means that have been damaged by the effect of human activities. it may exhibit itself in a variety of ways. There are 3 ways in which the impoverishment can show up. Number 1, accelerated erosion, as in the mountain regions of the country. Number 2, salinization of land, as in the semi-arid and arid green revolution areas of the country. For example, Haryana and Western Uttar Pradesh. And number 3, site quality decline, a common phenomenon due to general decline in tree cover and monotonous monoculture. Monotonous means repeated, and monoculture is the practice of growing only one crop. And monotonous monoculture of rice or wheat across the Indian plains. A major consequence of deforestation is that it relates to adverse alterations. Okay, so negative changes in the hydrology and related soil and nutrient losses. So it damages the water cycle of that area as well. And the nutrients in the soil also diminish. The consequences of deforestation invariably arise out of site degradation through erosive losses. So soil erosion is a consequence. Invariably means eventually. So it does happen eventually. So there's no escaping it. When there is deforestation, it results in soil erosion. Tropical Asia, Africa, and South America have the highest levels of erosion. And the already high rates for the tropics are increasing at an alarming rate. So they're increasing even more. For example, through the major river systems, that is Ganga and Brahmaputra in the Indian context. So due to deforestation and ill-suited land management practices subsequent to forest clearing. This is the reason. First of all, the deforestation takes place, and then the land management practices are not proper after the forest is cleared. In the mountain context, the declining moisture retention of the mountain soils, drying up of the underground springs and smaller rivers in the Himalayan region could be attributed to drastic changes in the forest cover. Okay, so these are more consequences, that soil erosion in the Himalayas and underground springs are drying up, rivers are drying up. All this is because of deforestation. An indirect consequence is drastic alteration in the upland lowland interaction. Upland means mountains, lowland means plains. So upland lowland interaction mediated through water. So rivers flowing from the mountains to the plains also get impacted. Impoverishment means becoming poor. So impoverishment of is given here, right? 1 minute. Yeah. Impoverishment of these ecosystems means a loss in productivity. The losses to the ecosystem. Yeah. The current concern the tea planter of Assam is about the damage to tea plantations due to frequent inundation along the floodplains of Brahmaputra. So the tea planters concern, inundation means flooding along the floodplains of Brahmaputra, and the damage to tea plantation and consequent loss in tea productivity is due to rising level of the river bottom because of siltation. Okay, and the changing course of the river system. So floods, rising river bottom, and changing in the course of the river. These are all consequences. Finally, he says the ultimate consequences of site desertification are soil degradation, alteration in available water and its quality, and the consequent decline in food, fodder, and fuel wood yields, essential for the economic well-being of rural communities. So he says rural communities suffer eventually. because of the soil degradation, the reduction in the quantity and quality of water, and food declines, the yield of food declines, that is your agriculture. Fodder declines, fodder is what we feed animals, and the wood that is used for fuel, that output also declines. So all these are the reasons why rural communities suffer economically. Now the questions are, what are the consequences of decline in forest cover? So just match your statements with the passage, whichever ones are given. Number one, loss of topsoil. Yes, that is soil erosion. So it's given. Number two, loss of small rivers. That's also given. See here, in the mountain context, drying up of small rivers. Adverse effect on agricultural production. Yes, that, damage to tea plantations is there, and decline in food yield is there. So that is also given. And declining of groundwater is also given. See in the Himalayas, drying up of underground springs. So all the four are valid consequences. Your answer should be D. For the first question, the answer should be D. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Second one, which of the following are the correct inferences that can be made from the passage? So number one, deforestation can cause changes in the course of rivers. So is it so that deforestation can cause changes in the course of rivers? The answer is yes, correct, true. Because it's given here, the changing course of the river system. So it's given directly, so that's can be inferred. Second one, salinization of land takes place due to human activities only. Now, this is not correct. Can you tell me why? What is the reason that this cannot be inferred? They are mentioning human activities. So why is this wrong? Can anybody tell me? Yes, correct. Because of the word only. When you write the word only, it means there is no other cause, which is wrong. There are other causes also. So yes, you are correct. Because of that, 2 is wrong. Third one, intense monoculture practice in plains is a major reason for desertification in tropical Asia, Africa, and South America. No, this is for India. This intense monoculture, this is for India, not for other countries. It's been mentioned for India. So only one. A is the answer. Answer is A, only one for this one. And then third one, with reference to desertification as described in the passage, the following assumptions have been made. So number one, desertification is a phenomenon in tropical areas only. The author does not believe this. Author does not believe this. Because he's saying it happens in the arid, semi-arid, and subhumid ecosystems as well. So because of that, one is wrong. Second one, deforestation invariably leads to floods and desertification. Invariably means eventually. It leads to floods and desertification. So yes, that is true. Because it's given here, the tea planters are worried about inundation along the floodplains of the Brahmaputra. So yes, it leads to floods. So question number 3, the second statement is correct. So answer is B, 2 only. B is the answer. Okay. Any doubts? If you don't have any doubts, please type clear in the chat box. And if you have doubts, please ask me. So I'll address them immediately. Third one. Yeah. So one is wrong because it's not only in tropical areas. And 2 is right because it's given that it leads to inundation along the floodplains of Brahmaputra. So the author believes that deforestation eventually leads to floods and to desertification. So B is the answer. Third one is B. Was that the doubt? Is it clear now? Okay, I hope it's clear. Let's proceed. Solve passage 2. Passage 2 has 4 questions, but actually just the first question will take time. So you just take 8 minutes and solve it. Passage 2, you have 8 minutes time. 4 questions, but I don't think you need extra time for this. So please begin. You can start solving passage 2. Okay, has everybody finished this passage 2, or anyone still doing it? Have you done it? Okay, fine. Let's discuss it then. So it's given here that India's role on the international stage was molded by history rather than by the pomp and circumstances of war. So pomp means grandeur. When you're showing off something, it says that you're being pompous. So it's not because of any victory or circumstance of war, it's because of history. Our role has been molded on the international stage. As a separate entity of the British Empire, India became a founder member of the League of Nations in the same way as Australia and Canada, and thus acquired a somewhat unique international status long before independence. So became a founder member and got this unique status because India was still a part of the British Empire, just like Australia and Canada. During the days of the League, when India's interests were affected, such as in matters of trade or the positions of Indians overseas, the Indian delegation did not hesitate to make known its independent position for what it was worth. So the Indian delegation, so the Indian members of the League of Nations always voice their opinion. For what it was worth means for whatever impact it could have. Some Indian delegates were in demand for chairing meetings riddled with contention and controversy. Riddled with means full of contention and full of controversy, because of their reputation for impartiality and talent for mediation. So, because of this, they were in demand for heading these meetings. These were the small beginnings of India's later entry into the United Nations in 1945, again as a founder member before independence. So, this is how India's journey began in these international organizations. The drafting of Chapter 9 and 10 of the UN Charter, which deal with international social and economic cooperation, was entrusted to a group that was presided over by an Indian. So an Indian person headed the group that drafted the charter. It is important, however, to bear in mind the fact that the government of independent India had no part in the drafting of the UN Charter. So it was just an individual, an Indian person who presided over it. The government of India did not take any part in it, although it accepted the obligations contained therein. So the government of India agreed to whatever conditions were there in the charter, though it did not take part in its drafting. The UN was primarily the creation of three parts: the USA, UK, and Russia. And the size, population, resources, and potential of India lent it the weight of a medium power in the functioning of the United Nations. So the three major powers were US, UK, Russia. India was a medium power. The fact that India was among the first nations to liberate itself from the imperialist domination through non-violent means endowed it with a moral obligation. So this gave India a moral obligation to work in and outside the UN for the independence of nations still under colonial rule. So since India gained independence through non-violent means, so it started helping other countries do the same as well. India has served on the Security Council for 10 years or 5 terms, on the Trusteeship Council for 12 years or 4 terms, and on the Economic and Social Council for 21 years or 7 terms. So this is the duration for which India has served. Now, the title below that best expresses the ideas of the passages. So which of these? So see, I assume you would have gotten confused between A and C, and this is the only question that is somewhat difficult in this passage. B can be clearly eliminated, India and her neighbors. D can be eliminated clearly, British colonial expansion, because this passage doesn't talk about any of these. So what did you choose, A or C? The title that best expresses the ideas of the passage. So this is very similar to primary purpose, okay, the main idea of the passage. And what you have to do is you have to consider the option and see why this passage was written. Does it match the title? So I mean, I'm saying this because C is wrong. A should be the answer. Okay, it's not C. A passage that talks about India's international prestige, what will it talk about? Or that you can use as a secondary logic. First of all, in this passage, what are the ideas expressed that relate to India's international prestige? The question is, best expresses the ideas of the passage. So in the passage, is the author talking about India's international prestige anywhere? Quickly scan through the passage. Okay, quickly scan through the passage and see if you can find it anywhere. If the author is expressing an idea that is related to India's international prestige. That's the League of Nations. League of Nations, then UN. It's talking about India's role on the international stage. Initially in the League of Nations and then in the UN. So that's okay. So yeah, I mean, it's the closest you have, because C is off topic. So even if you go by elimination, A is the closest. Mediation and impartiality. So that has nothing to do with prestige, you know. Prestige is a, you know, when you feel proud. So that's prestige, held in high regard. So those were the qualities for which Indian delegates were selected to chair these meetings. That has nothing to do with prestige. Those are characteristics, you can say. Characteristics because of which they were suitable to chair those meetings. Still, there is nothing about prestige. So even if we consider the fact that option A doesn't cover the League of Nations, which in the passage it is given was a precursor to UN, still A is the closest. Let's talking about the role, that these are the things that India has performed, helped in the drafting of UN Charter, helped other countries liberate themselves, chaired these meetings. And it starts off also by saying India's role on the international stage. So A is the answer, India's role at the UN. As you can see in the passage, there's no idea expressed about prestige. Now I'll come to the second logic. A title gives you a clear idea about what you can expect to read in the passage. If you see a passage titled India's role at the UN, the contents of this passage match it. This is what you will expect from that passage. If you read a passage titled India's international prestige, that passage will talk about things that India is proud of at a global level. For example, India's achievements in, of course, geopolitics, UN will be there. Additionally, they may also talk about India's achievements in science and tech, sports, development, literature, and all other arenas wherever India has contributed and we have prestige. This passage does not do that. So, India's international prestige is not the correct answer. India's role at the UN is the correct answer. Had anybody gone for A with this? can we write this in mains? I guess you can, because these are all, I suppose, but yeah, I mean, these are all factual passages, so I guess you can use it. Okay, fine. We just verify the information once. But yeah, it is factual, so you can. Okay. Is it clear now that the answer should be A? Okay. What about other students? Are you clear with it as well? Did anyone select A? Or, I mean, even if you went with C, I guess most of you went with C. I hope you're clear now. 2, 3, and 4 were simple conclusion-based questions. So, though a part of the British Empire, yeah. Last sentence is related to the UN Security Council, UNSC. India serves. So, this is the UN Security Council. Yes. Okay. So, though a part of the British Empire, India enjoyed great prestige at the League in as much as Indian delegates were in demand for chairing meetings to consider controversial issues. It was because, so it was because of their reputation for impartiality and their talent for mediation. So it's 1 and 2. 3 is wrong. India was not considered a power to reckon with. India was a medium power. India was a medium power. So it's 1 and 2. Option B. Second is B. And third one, which articles of the UN Charter deal with international, social and economic cooperation? That would be your chapters 9 and 10, they've said. So it would be A, articles 9 and 10. Option A, articles 9 and 10. And the fourth one, which of the following countries does not find any coverage in the passage? That is D, Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka is not mentioned anywhere in the passage. Okay, so I hope everyone's clear with this. Please type clear if you have understood this. We move on to passage 3. This is a fairly straightforward one. Passage 3 is fairly straightforward. So I think, yeah, this one also you can solve in exactly 8 minutes. No need of any extra time for this. I press enter by mistake. Time limit is 8 minutes for this. Please begin. Solve this passage 3. Okay, so has everyone finished it? Is everyone done? Okay, fine. So let's discuss this passage. So read the following passage and answer the questions that follow. Paragraph 2. So it's an excerpt from another text. It was during one of the most dreadful smallpox epidemics in England. So an epidemic is a widespread disease that Edward Jenner, a country doctor, made a discovery which was to alter the course of history. So alter means change. So this was to change the course of history. Jenner noticed that the disease seldom struck those, seldom means very rarely, struck those people who lived in rural areas and worked around cattle. Now, most farmers and dairy workers had contracted cowpox and had recovered with nothing more serious than a pustule which left a scar. This was most farmers and dairy workers. This observation led Dr. Jenner to think, why not vaccinate people with cowpox to protect them from smallpox? So, on May 14, 1876, Dr. Jenner took a healthy boy, James Phillips, to a dairy maid, Sarah Nems, who had a cowpox pustule on her hand, resulting from an infection from her master's cow. So he took a young boy, James Phillips, healthy boy, to Sarah Nems, and Dr. Jenner made 2 shallow cuts on James Phillips' arm and inoculated them. Inoculate means to inject with matter taken from the cowpox sore. A pustule developed on the boy's arm, formed a scab, and healed. So he infected him with cowpox. In July of the same year, Dr. Jenner inoculated James with matter from a smallpox pustule. Now, during the next 2 weeks, the doctor watched for signs of smallpox and they did not develop. So the vaccination was successful. Dr. Jenner wrote a paper explaining his method of vaccination. So at first, the doctors were hostile and would not listen to a ridiculous procedure. Many townspeople organized anti-vaccination campaigns. Gradually, however, the doctors and their patients accepted vaccination. They became hostile means very angry because of the way he inoculated the boy, but eventually they accepted it. So the questions here are, the fact that Edward Jenner was a country doctor was important in the discovery of smallpox vaccine because, so why was it important that Edward Jenner was a country doctor? Because the reason is given at the beginning. Prevalent means widespread. Prevalent means widespread. So he noticed that it seldom struck those. Seldom means rarely. So answer should be C. He noticed that the disease seldom struck people who worked around cattle. Something is prevalent if it's widespread, affecting a lot of people. So C is the answer. There's no indication of him having time to pursue his research. That's wrong. And D, he found that he could convince rural people more easily than city people. Nothing of the sort is given here. So that's also wrong. C is the answer. I hope you got C. And the second one, Dr. Jenner was successful as cowpox virus produces. Option A, severe infection in human resulting in deaths. That is not true because James Phillips did not die. Option B, a mild infection in humans, which is not enough to produce active immunity. Actually, active immunity was produced. So B is also wrong. Then C, a mild infection in humans, which is enough to produce active immunity. So yes, this is correct. This is correct. C is correct. And D, no infection in humans. This is wrong because he did develop an infection. He developed a pustule. The second answer is also C, a mild infection in humans, which is enough to produce active immunity. I hope you got that. Author spoke about the immunity, no? That's what vaccination is. They'll use synonyms. They'll not use the same words. It produced active immunity. See here, the vaccination was successful. So this means it produced active immunity. It's just another word which means the same thing. Okay. What is a vaccine? It's a drug that produces immunity. So it's implied. So C is the answer for the second one. Then the third one, Dr. Jenner made his experiment on a healthy boy who, option A, died after experimentation. That is wrong. He did not die. Option B, could not be relieved of his mark of pustule. We don't know whether he was or not relieved. Option C, developed the signs of pustule on his body when he was injected the matter of cowpox. Yes, he did. He did develop that pustule on his body. And D, was paid for it. We don't know whether he received any money for it. So C is the correct answer. Correct answer is C. And the fourth one, the passage has a, so passage has a narrative style. Narrative means a story. The author is not analyzing anything, so it cannot be analytical. Then the author is not trying to provoke you, so it's not provocative. And he's not writing in any particular style, so it's not idiomatic either. So it should be a narrative. To provoke means to make angry. So provocative would be to write in a way that makes you angry, to anger you. So answer will be A, narrative style. Are you clear with all the questions? Everyone's clear with all the questions? Is everybody clear with all the questions? Yes? Okay. Because he's not drawing any analysis. He's telling a story. This is a story of how the smallpox vaccine was developed. There is no analysis. So it can't be analytical. A narration is a story, a descriptive passage. Remember the tones? So it's narrative. If you read it, it's just a story. There is no analysis. Now we come to passage 4, which has 4 questions. It's an interesting passage. So you need to read it in detail. It has good questions also. So your time limit is 8 minutes. You can take a couple of minutes of extra time. Time limit is 8 minutes. Please start solving. You can begin now. You can start. Okay, so has everybody finished with this? Everyone's done with passage 4? Yes? Okay, so let's review it quickly. So it says that the Indian education system is quite an old education system that still exists. It has produced so many genius minds that are making India proud all over the world. Then he says, however, while it is one of the oldest systems, it is still not that developed when compared to others, which are in fact newer. This is so as the other countries have gone through growth and advancement, but the Indian education system is still stuck in old age. So even though it's older, it's not that developed. It faces a lot of problems that need to be sorted to let it reach its full potential. So then he mentions all the problems. So our Indian education system faces a lot of problems that do not let it prosper and help other children succeed in life. The biggest problem which it has to face is the poor grading system. Then that is explained. It judges the intelligence of a student on the basis of academics, which is in the form of exam papers. Now that is very unfair to students who are good in their overall performance, but not that good at specific subjects. Moreover, they only strive to get good marks, not paying attention to understanding what is taught. In other words, this encourages getting good marks through mugging up and not actually grasping the concept efficiently. Furthermore, we see how the Indian education system focuses on theory more. So these are all the problems. Just exam papers are there. It's very theoretical and only a little percentage is given for practical. This makes them run after the bookish knowledge. So students are more focused on gaining the bookish knowledge and not actually applying it to the real world. Now, this practice makes them perplexed. Perplexed is very confused when they go out in the real world due to lack of practical knowledge. Most importantly, the Indian education system does not emphasize enough on the importance of sports and arts. Strive means to aim. To aim. Where is that given? I'll just explain that. Can't find it though. Only strive to get good marks. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so they only aim to get good marks. Aim. Not paying attention to studying what is taught. Yeah. So this encourages them to mug up and they don't really grasp the concepts. Furthermore, we see how the Indian education system focuses on theory more. Only a little percentage is given for practical. This makes them run after bookish knowledge and not actually apply it to the real world. So yeah, we were here. This practice makes them perplexed, so very confused when they go out in the real world due to lack of practical knowledge. Most importantly, the Indian education system does not emphasize enough on the importance of sports and arts. So there's hardly any focus on sports and arts. Students are always asked to study all the time, where they get no time for other activities like sports and arts. As the Indian education system is facing so many problems, we need to come up with effective solutions so it improves and creates a brighter future for students. And he suggests that we can start by focusing on the skill development of the students. And in the second half, he explains how to do it. The schools and colleges must not only focus on the ranks and grades, but on the analytical and creative skills of children. In addition, subjects must not be merely taught theoretically, but with practical. This will help in a better understanding of the subject without them having to mug up the whole thing. So they will not have to memorize the entire thing due to lack of practical knowledge. Also, the syllabus must be updated with the changing times and not follow the age-old pattern. Other than that, the government and private colleges must now increase the payroll of teachers, as they clearly deserve more than what they offer. He says that to save money, schools hire teachers who are not qualified enough. Now, this creates a very bad classroom environment and learning. They must be hired. So, teachers must be hired if they are fit for the job and not because they are working at a lesser salary. So, these are all the suggestions. The major problems faced, it's given over here that the biggest problem it has to face is the poor grading system. So, the first answer will be B, poor grading system. You got B? Did you get B? It's given directly. Then what are the steps that can be taken? So that is both A and B. Both A and B. So answer will be C. Because it's given here, they must not only focus on the ranks and grades, which means this should be the focus, but not the only focus, but on the analytical and creative skills. So both are mentioned. So do you get C for the second one? Both A and B. You got C for this? Third one, what is ironical? And irony is something that is paradoxical. That will be D, old yet not developed. It's an old system, but not developed. So third is D. And the fourth one, bad environment in classroom is C, unqualified teachers. Paradoxical means contradictory. That has a contradiction where the opposite of what you expect happens. That is paradoxical. So an irony is a situation which has a paradox. So for this C, unqualified teachers, it's given here. The schools hire teachers who are not qualified enough, and this creates a very bad classroom environment. So fourth is C, unqualified teachers. Answer of third question is D, old yet not developed. First answer is B, poor grading system. Second answer is C, both A and B. Is everyone clear? Please type clear in the chat box if you have understood it. Now final passage, passage 5. It's a slightly abstract passage, little bit difficult. Take 10 minutes. There are 5 questions to it. So you have 10 minutes time. Please solve it. 5 questions, 10 minutes. Please begin. Okay, so has everybody finished with this one? All 5 questions? Have you finished? Done? Okay, let's have a quick discussion. So it is to progress in the human sciences that we must look to. We must look to means we must aim for. To undo the evils. Undo the evils means to reverse the damage which have resulted from a knowledge of the physical world hastily and superficially acquired by a population unconscious of the changes in themselves that the new knowledge has imperative. So very long sentence, break it down into parts. So we should aim to progress in the human sciences to reverse the damage that has resulted from a hasty and superficial knowledge acquired by us, that is a population unconscious of the changes in themselves, and this is why the new knowledge is important or has imperative. He says that the road to a happier world than any known in the past lies open before us if atavistic destructive passions, atavistic means primal, ancient, very old destructive passions, can be kept in leash, so kept under control, while the necessary adaptations are made. So if we can keep our destructive passions in control while the changes are made, we can have a happier world than any known in the past. Fears are inevitable in time, so they are unavoidable, but hopes are equally rational and far more likely to bear good fruit, far more likely to give good results. We must learn to think rather less of the dangers to be avoided than of the good that will lie within our grasp. Grasp means reach. If we can believe in it and let it dominate our thoughts. So I think we should not focus, we should focus less on the dangers to be avoided. And we should focus more on the good that will lie within our reach. So science, whatever unpleasant consequences it may have, by the way, is in its very nature a liberator. So science by nature gives you freedom, a liberator of bondage to physical nature, and in time to come, a liberator from the weight of destructive passions. So in the future, it will even liberate us from our destructive passions. We are on the threshold of utter disaster or unprecedented glorious achievement. So either we are going to have complete disaster or never see, unprecedented means something that's never happened before, or glorious achievement like never seen before. So no previous age has been fraught with problems so momentous. Momentous means important. And it is to science that we must look to for a happy future. So the author believes that if you want a happy future, we have to focus on science. So what does science liberate us from? It liberates us from. So the answer to this is not destructive passions and fears, because fears are inevitable. Inevitable means unavoidable. And he's not saying that it will liberate you from your passions. So C is the answer. Bondage to physical nature. It gives you idealistic hopes of a glorious future. Doesn't liberate you from it. So C is the answer. Did you get C? Question number 1, you got C. Everybody got C? Any doubt with this? Second is D. Second is D. Eliminate the destruction caused by a superficial knowledge of the physical world. That is given directly. You see here, it is to progress in the human sciences we must look to. So why? To undo the evils which have resulted from a knowledge of the physical world hastily and superficially acquired, which matches D. Eliminate the destruction caused by a superficial knowledge of the physical world. You got this? Or if you have doubts, please get them clarified. Any doubts with 1 and 2? Any doubts with 1 and 2? Okay, if you have any doubts, please ask. Man's bestial yearning is controlled. Bestial means animal-like. Yearning is desire. Why not C for second question? It's not mentioned anywhere that human sciences should be developed to make us conscious of changing in ourselves. It's given over here that we are unconscious of the changes in ourselves. But that's not with respect to the human sciences. He's saying it is to progress in human sciences we must look to. So why should we aim to progress in the human sciences? It's given here to undo the evils. So to reverse the damage that has been caused from a hasty and superficial knowledge of the world. Okay. Then third one. So yeah, what will happen if a bestial yearning is controlled? It's given here. The road to a happier world than any known in the past lies open before us if atavistic destructive passions can be kept in leash. So the answer will be B. The future will be brighter than the present. Okay, it is B. Future will be brighter than present. That is third answer. Because he is not saying future will be tolerable. He is saying happier world than any known in the past. So the happiest world basically. A happy world, so happy that has never been known in the past. Tolerable means something that you can just tolerate. So future will be brighter than the present. Bestial means animal-like, yearning means desire. So bestial yearning, your animalistic desire. That is similar to your atavistic passions. Yearning is a passion, atavistic is primal or ancient. So if you can control it or keep it in leash, you can have a happier world than any known in the past. So that is the reason. Okay, so hope that is clear. Then, yeah, so third is B. Fourth one, fears and hopes. Answer is A, are closely linked with the life of modern man because he's saying they're inevitable. Fears are inevitable, so they will be there. And hopes are equally rational, so equal to fears. They are logical. So both are a part of life. Can bear fruit and can yield good results. This is for hopes. This is not for fears. And he's not saying that they're irrational. He's saying fears are inevitable and hopes are equally rational. So both are rational. So fourth, did you select A? Did you select A for fourth one? That is for hopes. C is for hopes, not for fears. B and C are the same actually, and they are for hopes. Then number 5, to carve out a bright future, man should. So if you see here, it's given, we must learn to think less of the dangers than of the good. So we should, we should think of the good. So that is D, cultivate a positive outlook. He's saying think less of the dangers. He's not saying analyze them or avoid them or overcome them. He's saying just think less of them and think more of the good. So D is the answer. Fifth one is D. Did you get this? Okay. So that brings us to an end of part 1. We will take a short break now. After the break, we will continue with this class material 8. Okay. So any doubts in this, in these first 20 questions? We've done 20 questions till now. How many did you answer correctly? How many were correct in these 20? Just total up. How many were correct? Okay. Which one went wrong? So you got one. Which one was that? Was it the heading question that India's role at UN? Okay, fine. Okay. What about others? How many did you get correct? Okay. You can just send me a direct message. Just want to track your accuracy. Okay. Or answer option for 2 and 3 in second question. You mean second passage? Do you mean second passage or second passage? Okay. Sorry. 2 and 3. Second is B. 1 and 2 are correct. And 3 is A. Articles 9 and 10. In third passage, second and third questions were wrong. Okay. You got them wrong. Or you have doubt with them? You have doubt with them or you just got them wrong? Third passage. Okay. But is it clear? Is everybody clear? Fine. Okay. So guys, please go ahead, take a break. 15-minute break. Be back at, it's 11:05. Be back at 11:20. Be back at 11:20. Break time. Let's take a short break. And we will resume at sharp 11:20. So please be back on time. Go ahead, take a break. Please type, I'm back in the chat box if you have returned to your seat. Let's continue. Let's continue with the class. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Now see, in this class material 8, there are 15 questions. 15 questions spread across 9 passages. So we will take up 5 questions at a time. 5 questions at a time and do it in 3 parts. Okay, we are going to complete it in 3 parts. So the first part, you have to solve. So passage 1 is fairly long and it is 2 questions. Then passages 2, 3 and 4 are short passages with 1 question each. So what you have to do is you have to solve these first 4 passages, which have a total of 5 questions, and you will have 10 minutes plus some 3-4 minutes of extra time if you want it. So you have to solve passages 1 to 4. That is question 1 to question 5. And your time limit to do the same is 10 minutes. Okay. This is the first task. Solve passages 1 to 4. That is 5 questions in a total of 10 minutes. I'll give you some extra time at the end as well. So let's begin with this. Now we come back to short and long combined. So mostly short passages. Let's begin. And these are all fairly difficult compared to the level of questions that come on the CSAT. These are among the tough ones. Please begin. You can start now. Okay, so has everybody finished? 10 minutes plus 5 minutes of extra time is done. Has everybody finished it? Anyone who's still doing it? Okay, then let's begin. Let's discuss these 4 passages. Passage 1, biomass as fuel for power, heat, and transport has the highest mitigation potential of all renewable resources. It comes from, so highest, see, mitigation means minimization. So biomass has the highest potential for reducing the impact. It comes from agriculture and forest residues as well as from energy crops. So these are the sources. The biggest challenge in using biomass residues is a long-term reliable supply delivered to the power plant at reasonable costs. The key problems are logistical constraints and the cost of fuel collection. So having a sustainable supply is a problem at affordable costs. And so logistics is a problem and fuel collection is also a problem. So he's highlighting all the challenges. And he's saying that energy crops, if not managed properly, compete with food production and may have undesirable impacts on food prices. So food prices can go up if you grow energy crops, and food production will suffer. Biomass production is also sensitive to the physical impacts of a changing climate. Climate change also impacts it. So these are all the challenges associated with it. Now in the second paragraph, he says that projections of the future role of biomass probably overestimated, given the limits to the sustainable biomass supply, unless breakthrough technologies substantially increase productivity. So the use in the future is not going to be as much as it is being estimated. Climate energy models project that biomass use could increase nearly 4-fold to around 150 to 200 exajoules. That is almost a quarter of the world's primary energy in 2050. However, the maximum sustainable technical potential of biomass resources, that is both residues and energy crops, without disruption of food and forest resources, ranges from 80 to 170 exajoules a year by 2050. So that is the maximum that is possible. So as we can see, it's not going to be as much as is being projected. And only a part of this is realistically and economically feasible. So it's only some part of it can be achieved, not the entire thing. In addition, some climate models rely on biomass-based carbon capture and storage, an unproven technology. There's no proof that this is going to work, to achieve negative emissions and to buy some time during the first half of the century. So they rely on this biomass-based carbon capture. This is not a proven technology. So it's given that some liquid biofuels, such as corn-based ethanol, mainly for transport, may aggravate rather than ameliorate. So aggravate means to make worse, and ameliorate means to reduce. So instead of reducing carbon emissions on a life cycle basis, they may aggravate it. They may cause more emissions. For example, corn-based ethanol. So this can backfire. Second generation biofuels based on lignocellulosic feedstock, such as straw, bagasse, grass, and wood, hold the promise of sustainable production. So these kind of biofuels, straw, bagasse, grass, wood, they hold the promise of sustainable production that is high yielding and emit low levels of greenhouse gases. But these are still in the R&D stage. R&D means research and development. So they are not ready for mass production yet. So he's highlighted the problems and given some future predictions as to what can be done. So what assumptions has the author made? Number one, some climate energy models suggest that the use of biomass as a fuel for power generation helps in mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. Yes, that is correct. The author believes that because it's given over here that biomass as fuel for power, heat and transport has the highest mitigation potential. So that the author believes that it has the highest potential of all renewable resources. So number one is an assumption that the author believes. Second one, it is not possible to use biomass as a fuel for power generation without disrupting food and forest resources. That's not true that it's not possible. It's possible, just that it can only be done to a certain extent. So he's saying only a part of this is realistically and economically feasible. So it's not that you can't do it, you can do it, but only up to a certain extent. So the second one is wrong. And the correct answer is B, one only. Did you get this? Got B, one only? Did you select this? Okay, fine. Second question, what are the constraints in using biomass as fuel for power generation? So number one, lack of sustainable supply of biomass. Yes, this is a valid constraint, because if you see the first paragraph, it is given that the biggest challenge is a long-term reliable supply. Long-term reliable supply. So first one is correct. Second one, biomass production competes with food production. So that is also correct. It's given that energy crops, if not managed properly, compete with food production. So the second one is also valid. Third one, bioenergy may not always be low carbon on life cycle basis. That's also correct, because it's given here that an example is given corn-based ethanol. It may aggravate rather than ameliorate carbon emissions on a life cycle basis. So the correct answer for this one will be C, 1, 2 and 3. Please mention if you have any doubts. Just excuse me for 1 minute. Okay. Life cycle basis means throughout their life, throughout the span of their life. That is corn-based ethanol in its life cycle, from the time it's produced to the time it's consumed, can basically have even worse carbon emissions than what's happening currently. So first question answer is B, 1 only. And second question answer is C, 1, 2 and 3. Is it clear? Everyone got it? Doubts are cleared? Guys, is it clear? The doubts you had asked? Okay, it's fine. Let's leave it. Move ahead. Passage 2. By killing transparency and competition, crony capitalism is harmful to free enterprise. So crony is a friend. So crony capitalism is a term. It's called friendly capitalism. It's used to define a situation where some companies become friendly with the government and try to curry favor. So it is harmful to free enterprise, opportunity and economic growth. Crony capitalism, where rich and influential are alleged to have received land and natural resources and various licenses in return for payoffs to venal politicians. Venal means corrupt. So they have received these favors in return for bribes given to corrupt politicians is now a major issue to be tackled. One of the greatest dangers to growth of developing economies like India is the middle income, where crony capitalism creates oligarchies that slow down the growth. An oligarchy is a system where a few companies control the market. So that is one of the major dangers of crony capitalism. It creates oligarchies that slow down the growth. So what is the most logical corollary here? Corollary means conclusion. Option A, launching more welfare schemes and allocating more finances for the current schemes are urgently needed. There is no mention of any welfare scheme in this passage. So A is wrong. Then B, efforts should be made to push up economic growth by other means and provide licenses to the poor. Again, there is no indication of providing any license to the poor. So B is wrong. Then option C, greater transparency in the functioning of the government and promoting the financial inclusion are needed at present. This is correct, because he's saying that crony capitalism is killing transparency and competition, and they are getting land and natural resources, and oligarchies can be created. So it's important to have greater transparency and more financial inclusion. So C is correct. And D, we should concentrate more on developing manufacturing sector than service sector. No comparison has been made between the development of manufacturing sector versus the service sector. So D is also incorrect. C is the correct answer. Did you select C? And if you're clear with the first three questions, please type clear in the chat box, because you had some doubts. So I haven't received any response whether it is clear. Are you clear? What about other students? Guys, please type in the chat box and tell me. Otherwise, I don't get to know whether you are understanding or not understanding. Okay, thank you. Fine. So I understand that everyone's clear. Now let's move ahead to passage 3. So it says that in the last 2 decades, the world's gross domestic product, or GDP, has increased by 50%, whereas inclusive wealth has increased by a mere 6%. So in recent decades, GDP-driven economic policy is highlighting how the GDP has increased, but inclusive wealth hasn't increased that much. So GDP-driven economic performance has only harmed inclusive wealth, like human capital, and natural capital, like forests, land, and water. So GDP-driven growth is a problem. While the world's human capital, which stands at 57% of total inclusive wealth, grew by only 8%. The natural capital, which is 23% of total inclusive wealth, declined by 30% worldwide in the last 2 decades. So he's highlighting the impact of GDP-driven growth. Human capital has grown very slowly and natural capital has actually declined. So what can we infer from this? Option A, economic performance of the countries of the world is not satisfactory. There is no indication in the passage that the economic performance is unsatisfactory. Option B, the world needs more human capital under the present circumstances. So it is given that it was at 57% and it has grown by 8%, but it is not given that we need more. So B is also not correct. Fourth one, the growth driven by GDP only is neither desirable nor sustainable. That is correct, because he's saying because of that, human capital and natural capital are getting negatively impacted and it is not sustainable either. And D, more emphasis should be laid on the development of natural capital. Though it is given that natural capital has declined, no such suggestion has been given that emphasis should be laid on its development. So the correct answer is C. Growth driven by GDP only is neither desirable nor sustainable. Okay, fourth answer is C. Okay. So any doubts with this? And the last one, passage 4. Why do people prefer open defecation? Third one answer. Third one, it is C. Greater transparency. This one. C is the answer. Okay. Then why do people prefer open defecation and not want toilets? Or if they have them, only use them sometimes. So that is the question being asked. Recent research has shown two critical elements. So TWO, this should be TWO2, two critical elements. Ideas of purity and pollution, and not wanting pits or septic tank to fill because they have to be empty. These are the problems. They have certain ideas of purity and pollution and they don't want the septic tank to fill because then somebody has to go and empty it. These are the issues that nobody wants to talk about. But if we want to eradicate means to remove the practice of open defecation, they have to be confronted and dealt properly. So that is the issue that the author is mentioning. Now, which among the following is the most crucial message conveyed by the above passage? Option A, people cannot change their old habits. There is no indication here that people cannot change their old habits. So A is wrong. Option B, people have neither civic sense nor sense of privacy. He's not blaming the people. He's saying they have certain problems that need to be addressed. So it's not B. Option C, the ideas of purity and pollution are so deep rooted that they cannot be removed from the minds of the people. This is again an extreme option. He's not saying that they can't be removed. Rather, he's giving us ways in which we can remove them. So C is wrong. Then D is the correct answer. People have to perceive toilet use and pit emptying as clean and not polluting, because currently they view it as polluting and they don't want to empty the septic tanks. So fifth one is D. Did you select D? Did you select D as the answer? Okay, great. Now we move on to the next exercise. You have to solve passages 5 and 6. Okay, passages 5 and 6. That is questions 6 to 10. The next 5. Passage 5 is 4 questions. Passage 6 is 1 question. And your time limit is 10 minutes. Couple of minutes extra is fine. You can take a couple of minutes extra, but not too much. So yeah, you can begin with this now. Please start. Passages 5 and 6. Okay, so done with this. Everyone's finished with passages 5 and 6. 10 minutes plus 2 minutes are done. Is anyone still doing it or everyone's done? Okay, fine. So let's begin. Passage 5 says that accountability or the lack of it in governance generally and civil services in particular is a major factor underlying the deficiencies in government and public administration. So lack of accountability is a major factor. Designing an effective framework for accountability has been a key element of the reform agenda. So we need to have a proper framework for holding civil services and hold them accountable. A fundamental issue is whether civil services should be accountable to the political executive of the day or to society at large. So which one? In other words, how should internal and external accountability be reconciled? Reconciled means they should be matched. So internal accountability is sought to be achieved by internal performance monitoring, official supervision by bodies like the Central Vigilance Commission and Comptroller and Auditor General, and judicial review of executive decisions. So this is how you see internal accountability. And also he says Articles 311 and 312 of the Indian Constitution provide job security and safeguards to the civil services, especially the All India services. So that's another way of seeking accountability. Their jobs are safeguarded. The framers of the Constitution had envisaged means they had imagined, they had foreseen that provision of these safeguards would result in a civil service that is not totally subservient to the political executive, but will have the strength to function in larger public interest. The need to balance internal and external accountability is thus built into the Constitution because of these Articles 311 and 312. The issue is where to draw the line. So over the years, the emphasis seems to have tilted in favor of greater internal accountability of civil services to the political leaders of the day, who in turn are expected to be externally accountable to the society at large. So civil service should be internally accountable to the political leaders, and in turn the political leaders should be accountable to the public through the election process. This system for seeking accountability to society has not worked out and has led to several adverse consequences for government. Adverse consequences means negative consequences for governance. Some special measures can be considered for improving accountability in civil services. Now he's giving suggestions. Provisions of Articles 311 and 312 should be reviewed and laws and regulations framed to ensure external accountability of civil services. So this should be done. The proposed civil services bill seeks to address some of these requirements. Some requirements will be addressed. The respective roles of professional civil services and the political executive should be defined. So these are all the suggestions given by the author, so that professional managerial functions and management of civil services are depoliticized, so that they can be kept away from politics. For this purpose, effective statutory civil service boards should be created at the center and in the states. And then he says that decentralization and devolution of authority to bring government and decision making closer to the people also helps to enhance accountability. So this is again external accountability, accountability to the people, decentralization and devolution. So here question number 6, according to the passage, which of the following is not a means of enhancing internal accountability of civil services? So A, better job security and safeguards, B, supervision by CVC, and C, judicial review of executive decisions. They are all given here, internal accountability. All of these, internal accountability. The last one, option D, seeking accountability through enhanced participation by people. This is not for internal, this is for external accountability, given at the end. So did you select D? D is the correct answer. Question number 6. Did you select D for it? Everybody got D? Judicial review is here. Judicial review of executive decisions. Judicial review of executive decisions. Then question number 7, with reference to the passage, the following assumptions have been made. Number 1, political executive is an obstacle to the accountability of the civil services to the society. The author believes in this. This is correct, because he is saying that nowadays there is greater internal accountability to the political leaders, who in turn are expected to be externally accountable. And he's saying that this system has not worked out. So this system has failed. So 1 is correct. Political executive is an obstacle. Second work, in the present framework of Indian polity, the political executive is no longer accountable to society. This is not indicated anywhere. The author is saying that political executive is accountable to society through the election process. So 2 is wrong. 1 is correct. 1 is correct. The answer is A. 7th answer is A. You got A for this? Did you get A for this? Okay. 8th one. Last sentence of first para says external accountability not working out. Yes, not working out. So that's why it's an obstacle. Not working out means mechanism is in place and it is failing. It is not working out. It doesn't mean that they're not accountable. It means they're accountable, and that the way the accountability is structured, it's not working out. Not working out doesn't mean that they're no longer accountable. They are accountable. It's not working out. That's all. Okay, fine. Then the eighth one, which of the following factors led to the adverse consequences? So number one, inability of civil services to strike a balance between internal and external accountability. This is correct because the author is saying that now there is a mismatch. There is much more internal accountability than external accountability. So one is correct. Second one, lack of sufficient professional training to the officers of the All India services. There is no indication of the training that they receive. So 2 is wrong. Third one, lack of proper service benefits in civil services. Again, there is no indication of what kind of service benefits are given. So 3 is wrong. And 4, lack of constitutional provisions to define the respective roles of professional civil services vis-a-vis. Vis-a-vis means with respect to political executive. That is given. You see over here, the respective roles should be defined, which means currently they're not defined. So 1 and 4 both are factors. So B should be the answer. 1 and 4 only. Okay, I hope it is clear. And the last one, essential message, again, the primary purpose. So they are not primarily focused on they're mainly focused on the accountability. Accountability of civil services. So the only option that talks about the accountability of civil services is option B. There is a need and scope for reforms to improve the accountability in civil services. None of the other options talk about accountability. So answer for 8th one is B, 1 and 4 only. 8th is B, 1 and 4 only. Okay, now passage 6. It says that understanding the role of biodiversity in the hydrological cycle enables better policy making. The term biodiversity refers to the variety of plants, animals, microorganisms, and the ecosystems in which they occur. So this is the definition of biodiversity. Water and biodiversity are interdependent. So they rely on each other. In reality, then this is how they rely on each other. The hydrological cycle decides how biodiversity functions. In turn, vegetation and soil drive the movement of water. So water determines biodiversity and vegetation and soil determine the movement of water. So in this way, they are interrelated. Every glass of water we drink has, at least in part, passed through fish, trees, bacteria, soil, and other organisms. Passing through these ecosystems, it is cleansed and made fit for consumption. The supply of water is a critical service that the environment provides. So, yeah, the passage talks about the interdependence of water and biodiversity. So, what can we infer from this? Option A, biodiversity sustains the ability of nature to recycle water. That is exactly what is given here, that they are interdependent. So, A is correct. B, we cannot get potable water. Potable means drinkable water without the existence of living organisms. It's not given what will happen without the existence of living organisms. So B is wrong. C says plants, animals, and microorganisms continuously interact among themselves. They interact with water. So C is wrong, not among themselves. That's irrelevant to the passage. And option D, living organisms could not have come into existence without hydrological cycle. So we don't know what would have happened without hydrological cycle. So D is also wrong. The correct answer is A, that biodiversity sustains the ability of nature to recycle water. 10th answer is A. 10th is A. 9th question. The answer is B. There is a need and scope for reforms. 9th is B, 10th is A. Are you clear with all of these? Clear with all of these? Any doubts, please? Now the final exercise, the last 5 questions, that is passages 7, 8 and 9. Passages 7, 8 and 9. 5 questions, again you have 10 minutes plus a couple of minutes of extra time. So please solve this last exercise for the day. 6th question, the answer is D, seeking accountability through enhanced participation. D is the answer for question 6. Okay, I hope everybody is clear with this. Please do this, passage 7, 8 and 9. You can begin. Okay, so has everybody finished? All done with passages 7, 8 and 9? Or anybody still doing it? 7, 8 and 9? Are you done with it? Passage 7, 8 and 9? Okay, fine. So now let's discuss it. So passage 7 is saying that in general, religious traditions stress our duty to God or to some universal ethical principle. Our duties to one another derive from this. So our duties to one another stem from our duty to God or to some other universal ethical principle. The religious concept of rights is primarily derived from our relationship to this divinity or principle and the implication it has on our other relationships. So, okay, so he's saying basically our relationships derive from our relationship with God. This correspondence between rights and duties is critical to anyone for the understanding of justice. But for justice to be practiced, rights and duties cannot remain formal abstraction. So they have to be real. Abstract is something that is not real. So they cannot remain just words, formal abstractions. They must be grounded in a community, that is common unity, bound together by a sense of common union, that is a communion. And even as a personal virtue, this solidarity is essential to the practice and understanding of justice. Virtue means good qualities, you can say. It's called a virtue. So this solidarity, which means community and communion, it is essential for the practice and understanding of justice. So with reference to the passage, the following assumptions have been made. Number one, human relationships are derived from their religious traditions. So that is true. It's given over here. Our duties to one another derive from this, from our religious tradition. So the author believes in this. That is correct. Second one, human beings can be duty bound only if they believe in God. That is not correct. He doesn't say anything like that. He's saying if they believe in God or to some universal ethical principles. There are two options given. Third one, religious traditions are essential to practice and understand justice. So the solidarity between community and communion is what is essential to practice and understand justice, not religious traditions. So 2 and 3 both are not correct. 1 is the correct assumption. So answer will be A, 1 only. 11th answer is option A, 1 only. Okay, I hope it is clear. 11th answer is A, 1 only. Because it is given that this solidarity is essential to practice and understand justice. What solidarity? This community and communion. It's not religious traditions. So because of that, 3 is not correct. It doesn't match the information in the passage. Then question 12, which one of the following is the crux of this passage? Okay, so leave your options from your understanding. What is the main message conveyed? Like, what is the basic or what is the main point covered in this passage? What is the main topic? What are they talking about in this passage? What are they mainly talking about? Delivery of justice. Mainly talking about delivery of justice. So the only option on your 4 options that talks about delivery of justice is the third one, option C. Balance between rights and duties is crucial to the delivery of justice in a society. None of the other options talk about delivery of justice. So C is the only one that can be correct. Got it? C is the only one that is correct. Crux is meaning. Crux, the main point of the passage, the main purpose of the passage. Okay. Got it? Fine. Then see your passage 8. Individuals, groups, and leaders who promote human development operate under institutional, structural, and political constraints that affect policy options. But experience suggests broad principles for shaping an appropriate agenda for human development. Okay, so those individuals, groups, and leaders who promote human development, they operate under these constraints that affect policy options. And he's saying, but experience suggests that we should have broad principles. So one important finding from several decades of human development experience is that focusing exclusively on economic growth is problematic. So we should focus on other things as well. We should not focus only on economic growth. While we have good knowledge, sorry, my screen is getting stuck. Just a minute. Yeah. Okay. So Yes, while we have good knowledge about how to advance health and education, the causes of growth are much less certain and growth is often elusive. So unlike health and education, about which we have good knowledge, we don't really understand the causes of growth. And growth is also elusive. Further, an unbalanced emphasis on growth is often associated with negative environmental consequences and adverse distributional effects. So it harms the environment, and the benefits of the growth are also not distributed properly. The experience of China with its impressive growth record reflects these broader concerns. So China is an example of this negative environmental consequences and adverse distributional effects. So that reflects, so it shows these concerns and underlines the importance of balanced approaches that emphasize investments in non-income aspects of human development. Now, what are the assumptions made by the author? Number one, higher economic growth is essential to ensure reduction in income disparity. The author is not promoting higher economic growth. He's saying too much focus on economic growth can be problematic. So he's not talking in favor of higher economic growth. So one is wrong. And two, environmental degradation is sometimes a consequence of economic growth. That is correct. He says that it is associated with negative environmental consequences. So one is wrong and two is right. So 13th answer is B, 2 only. Okay, answer is B, 2 only. Fourteenth one, with reference to the above passage, consider the following statements. In developing countries, a strong institutional framework is the only requirement for human development and policy options. Now, the author does not really say that it is the only requirement. So one is wrong. Second one, human development and economic growth are not always positively interrelated. That is correct. That is correct. Because he's saying it has adverse distributional effects. They're not always positively interrelated. Third one, focusing only on human development should be the goal. He's not saying it should only be focusing on economic growth. So yeah, 2 only. That's the answer. 14th answer is C, 2 only. Okay. And the last one, passage 9. It says that an increase in human-made carbon dioxide in the atmosphere could initiate a chain reaction between plant and microorganisms that would unsettle one of the largest carbon reservoirs on the planet, soil. The soil is one of the largest reservoirs. In a study, it was found that soil, which contains twice the amount of carbon present in plants and Earth's atmosphere combined, so that is the extent of carbon present in soil, could become increasingly volatile as people add more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. This is largely because of increased plant growth. So carbon dioxide will lead to more plant growth. Although a greenhouse gas and a pollutant, carbon dioxide also supports plant growth. It is said that as trees and other vegetation flourish in a carbon dioxide rich future, their roots could stimulate microbial activity in soil that may in turn accelerate the decomposition of soil carbon and its release into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. So this is how he is given it, that as vegetation will flourish, microbial activity will get stimulated by the roots, and this can accelerate the decomposition of soil. So what is the most logical corollary? So A says increasing green cover could trigger the release of carbon trapped in soil. Yes, that is correct. B is wrong because he's not saying that humans are solely responsible. So that's wrong. C says microorganisms are mainly responsible. Again, that is not correct. That is not correct. So that's wrong. And he's not saying carbon dioxide is essential for the survival of microorganisms and plants. What he's saying is carbon dioxide is useful. So it supports plant growth. It's not given that it's essential. Okay, it's not given that it is essential. So A is the answer. 15th one, the answer is A. Are you clear with this? Okay. How many did you get correct? How many did you get correct? In these 15 questions, okay. Any doubts? Any pending doubts? Okay. Fine, guys. Then in that case, that's all we had for today. And yes. So if you have any doubts, please go ahead and ask me. Or if you don't have doubts, you can log out. That's all that we had for today. Quite an extensive session. Next class is the last one. We'll solve some tough short passages and the previous year's question paper. So thank you everyone for this session. I hope everything's clear. And next class is the last class. So that then we'll wind up. So those who are clear, you can log out, and those who have doubts, please go ahead and ask. Okay, then I think I'll also end the session. See you next week.